Hey, I'm Tyler, 25, living on my own in a tranquil small town just outside Columbia, South Carolina. I make a living as a mechanic at the nearby shop. It's not thrilling, but it's solid work and I've always enjoyed piecing things back together. A couple of years ago, I managed to buy a little house here. The mortgage still nags at me, but it's my place. My street's calm, filled with friendly folks, the sort who still toss you a wave at dawn. Directly across from me are Emily and Ryan, a childless couple in their early 30s, married for about 5 or 6 years. To outsiders, they looked like your everyday duo. Ryan's relaxed, always up for a chat. We'd occasionally chill, catch a ball game, or fire up the grill in the warmer months. Emily was approachable, great for a quick conversation, nothing beyond standard neighborly stuff. From my perspective, it was always just that, nothing more. But over the past few months, I started noticing a change. Whenever I crossed paths with Emily picking up mail, rolling into my driveway, or strolling by, she seemed on edge, like something heavy was pressing on her. Little by little, she began to share. At first, it was minor grumbles, Ryan staying late at work, acting aloof. Then her words grew heavier. She said he was rarely home, hardly spoke to her anymore. She mentioned spotting texts on his phone from unfamiliar names. She never outright said it, but it was obvious she suspected he was stepping out on her. I was at a loss for words. What do you even say to that? I wasn't about to dive into their mess, so I just listened, gave a nod, and kept things polite. One evening, I just pulled in from the shop and she was returning from a walk. We met on the sidewalk. She looked drained. I asked if she was okay. With a weary sigh, she muttered something like, he said he was stuck at work again, but didn't even bring his laptop back. Without thinking, I shrugged and tossed out, maybe you ought to walk away from him. It wasn't planned, just a careless remark you'd expect to be brushed off. But she didn't chuckle, didn't crack a smile, didn't even flinch. She just stared at me, her gaze piercing, and murmured, yeah, maybe. Then she turned and walked off, no farewell, no wave, nothing. I stood there, feeling like a total fool, wondering if I'd overstepped. That night, I couldn't shake it. I told myself she was just exhausted, maybe didn't even register my words. Or maybe she did, and they landed harder than I intended. Either way, I thought that was that. I wasn't going to bring it up again. I steer clear of drama, especially with folks living right across the street. The next day, I carried on as usual, working a double shift at the garage. I got home past 9:30, popped open a beer, flipped on the game, and was munching through a bag of chips when a knock at the door startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and there stood Emily on my porch, 2 bags in tow, her expression unforgettable. Before I could get a word out, she said, I filed the papers this morning. I'm done spending nights in that house. I blinked, trying to process it. Ryan's still there? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, but I'm not. Not anymore. I glanced at her bags, then back at her, still clueless about what was happening. She raised an eyebrow and said, you gonna let me in, or just stand there all night? I stepped aside, mumbling, yeah, sure, come on in. She strode in like it was routine, set her bags by the couch, and plopped down like she owned the place. Me? I was stuck, unsure whether to call Ryan or maybe a therapist. She looked up and said, I'll bunk on the couch. Just need a spot to catch my breath tonight. I gave a slow nod. Okay. She stretched out, pulled the throw blanket over herself, and was out cold in minutes. I lingered there a moment, then grabbed my phone, slipped outside, and dialed Ryan. He answered on the second ring. Yo, I said. Hey man, you got a sec to talk? He sounded puzzled, like he couldn't figure out why I was calling. Sure, what's up? I told him I was nearby, didn't want to spill too much over the phone, and asked if I could swing by for a bit. He said, yeah, no issue. I threw on a hoodie, snagged 2 beers from the fridge, and crossed the street. My hands were trembling, not from fear, just nerves. I had no idea how this was gonna play out. It's not every day your neighbor's wife shows up with her bags. Ryan opened the door in sweats and a tee, barefoot, looking like sleep had been dodging him. The house was dimly lit. He let me in and I offered a beer. Thought you might want one. He nodded. Thanks, he said, taking it. We settled out back on his porch. It was still just the faint hum of crickets and a few porch lights flickering across the street. I didn't beat around the bush. Look, man, I began, I'm gonna be upfront with you. I don't want this to get awkward between us, so here's the deal. Ryan gave me a weary, guarded look like he was already steeling himself for bad news. Emily's at my place, I said. She showed up about an hour ago with a couple of bags. Said she filed for divorce and didn't want to stay here with you. He took a long swig of his beer and stayed quiet for a beat, staring off past the yard like his mind was elsewhere. I quickly added I didn't invite her over. And I swear, Ryan, there's never been anything between me and her, nothing now, nothing ever. I looked at him, making sure he got it. I just didn't want you hearing this from someone else. He nodded slowly. Yeah, she told me she was filing. I figured she'd crash at her sister's. I didn't know how to reply to that. After a pause, he turned to me and said, thanks for letting me know, man. I mean it. I know you, Tyler, you're not the type to play games like that. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling heavily. Truth is, I'm wiped out. I've been trying to keep this marriage afloat for years, but it's like she's never content. When I wasn't clocking enough hours, she called me a slacker. Now I'm working late and she thinks I'm stepping out. No winning. She mentioned seeing odd texts on your phone, I said. Ryan let out a dry chuckle. That was a client. I do some card detailing on the side. It was a woman asking about a cleaning job, that's all. But Emily read it wrong. So she really thinks you're cheating? I'm not, he said plainly. But I stopped trying to prove it months ago. You ever hit that point where you're just done explaining yourself? That's me. I nodded. Yeah, I hear you. She's always been intense, he went on. Passionate. When things are great, it's incredible, but when they're rough, it's like slamming into a brick wall. I've been trying to hold it together, he said, but I'm just drained. We sat quietly for a while, the night sounds filling the space. I'll let her stay at my place for a few days, I said eventually, just till she sorts out her next step. The couch is hers for now. My folks are coming next week anyway. Ryan nodded. That's cool. Honestly, I don't care where she goes anymore. I just want some calm for once. I hope this doesn't screw things up between us, I said. He met my eyes. Tyler, you're one of the few neighbors I actually trust. I know who you are. If she's with you, I know she's safe and I know you won't do anything dumb. That hit me harder than I expected. I let out a slow breath. We hung out there for another hour or so, talking not about Emily but about other stuff. Work, stupid stories from last summer's bar nights, random car tales. We even cracked a few laughs. It felt normal, refreshing. Eventually, I said goodnight and headed back. When I walked inside, the house was silent. Emily was still fast asleep on the couch, tucked under the throw blanket, unmoved. Her phone lay beside her, screen dark. She looked serene, not like the stressed woman who'd been venting to me for weeks, just at peace. I wandered to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter, trying to make sense of it all. She'd really done it, left her marriage and landed at my doorstep. And no, I wasn't flattered or proud. If anything, I was uneasy, not because I didn't care, but because I did. The last thing I wanted was to be the guy who broke up a marriage, even one already fraying at the seams. I hit the sack after that. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying that flippant comment from the night before, maybe you ought to walk away from him. I'd meant it as a throwaway line. I never dreamed she'd take it seriously. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Faint light was just creeping through the blinds. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all, that Emily hadn't shown up, that she wasn't crashed on my couch with her life stuffed in 2 bags. But when I stepped into the living room, there she was, already up. She sat on the couch, draped in the same blanket, cradling a coffee mug, dressed in a hoodie and sweats, hair pulled back, no makeup, just real. When she saw me, she offered a small, weary smile. Nothing forced, just soft. Good morning, she said softly. Hey, I mumbled back, still wiping the grogginess from my eyes. Sleep okay? She gave a small nod. Better than I have in ages. I brewed myself a coffee and settled into the armchair across from her. A peculiar silence hung between us, not uneasy, but thick, like we both sensed its weight but weren't sure how to break it. I figured I'd just dive in. "Emily," I said cautiously, "can I ask you something?" She glanced up from her mug. "Go ahead." "Why me?" She blinked, puzzled. "What's that mean?" "I mean, you've got family, friends, probably a ton of other places you could have crashed. So why here? Why my doorstep?" She gazed into her coffee for a moment, mulling it over. Then she said, "Because I feel safe with you. You've always been straight up with me, never made me feel small." She went on, "And when you said what you did yesterday, I don't know, it flipped a switch in me. Maybe I just needed someone to voice what I'd been burying." I leaned back, exhaling. Truth be told, that was a stupid thing for me to blurt out. "I didn't mean it like that." "Maybe it was dumb," she replied, "but it shook me awake. It made me stop and think, why am I still in that house with someone who doesn't care about me anymore?" I didn't know what to say. Anything I came up with felt like it'd either sound too personal or too hollow. "Emily," I said, choosing my words carefully, "have you considered that maybe Ryan isn't actually stepping out on you?" She didn't respond right away. "He's never around, Tyler," she said at last. "Always at work late, comes home, barely mutters a word, barely looks my way. There's nothing left between us, no warmth, no connection. We're like roommates who don't even get along. But what if he's really just swamped with work?" I pressed. "What if he's trying in his own way?" She shook her head. "I'm done talking about him." I nodded. "Fair enough. I just didn't want you to make a choice you might regret. That's all." Her voice softened to a near whisper. "I've already made it." We sat quietly for a bit, sipping our drinks. Eventually, I said, "Look, you can stay here a few days, maybe a week max. After that, my folks are visiting and I'll need the space." She nodded. "Got it. I'll start hunting for a place today." I headed to work around 10 o'clock, already late, so I didn't say much more. But as I backed out of the driveway, I caught her in the doorway, arms folded, watching me go. She looked utterly adrift, not just because of Ryan, but like she'd lost her sense of self outside of being his wife. All day at the shop, my thoughts kept drifting back to her. I kept telling myself, this isn't your drama. Stay out of it. I did what any decent person would, offered a hand when someone was in need. That's it. But deep down, I couldn't shake the sense that I'd sparked something. Like that one careless remark, "Maybe you ought to walk away from him," had lit the fuse on a choice she'd already been wrestling with. When I got home that night and didn't see her on the couch, my heart sank. For a split second, I thought she'd grabbed her stuff and left without a word. Then I spotted her through the kitchen window, sitting out back, thumbing through her phone. I stepped outside. "You good?" I asked. "Yeah," she said. "I've been calling around. Found a few short-term rentals, but they're either all booked or way out of my budget." I plopped down beside her on the porch step. "No need to hurry. You've got a few days yet." She glanced my way. "Thanks, Tyler, for letting me crash here. I know this isn't your burden." "It's fine," I said. "Well, it's kind of mine now, but I'm cool with it." She let out a quiet chuckle, the first time I'd heard her laugh since this whole mess started. Later that night, I got a text from Ryan. "Appreciate you being real with me last night. Just wanted to say I'm not pissed. Honestly, it's a relief to have it all out in the open. I just hope she finds the calm she's chasing." I stared at that message for a while. It felt so final. I didn't respond right away, just let it sink in. In that moment, I knew things were never going back to how they were, not for Ryan and Emily, and maybe not for me either. Whatever boundary separated being a neighbor from getting tangled in someone else's split, I'd already crossed it, intentionally or not. By day 3, we'd fallen into an odd kind of rhythm. Emily was up early, straightening the kitchen, brewing fresh coffee, and mostly keeping to herself. She didn't act like she owned the place, more like she was trying not to wear out her welcome, even though we were already deeper in than I'd expected. I'd roll in from the garage around 6 o'clock, and she'd usually be scrolling on her phone or sometimes whipping up something simple, not to be polite, but like she needed to feel productive. We steered clear of talking about Ryan. I didn't mention him, and neither did she. but our silences carried weight like there was always an unspoken topic hovering nearby. One evening after dinner, we sat out on the porch. It was peaceful, just crickets chirping, the occasional car rolling by, and the soft clink of her spoon against her tea mug. She stared across the yard and asked, "Ever feel like your life's just happening around you?" I didn't answer right off. Like, she went on, "You're going through the motions, cleaning, working, putting on a smile when you're supposed to, but it doesn't feel like you're really there?" I gave a slow nod. "Yeah, I've had those moments, especially when I first settled here. I'd wake up, look around this house, and wonder, is this all there is? Just me and a pile of bills?" She managed a faint smile. "At least you've carved out something. This house is yours. You've got a job, make your own choices. You don't need anyone's okay to buy a new rug or take a day off." She added, "That's freedom." "You could have had that too," I said. "I thought I did," she murmured. "But maybe it was never real. Or maybe I just convinced myself it was." She paused, then looked at me. "I'm not trying to be heavy, Tyler. I know I showed up out of the blue and you've been more than kind, but it's sinking in now. I really did it." I walked away and there's no turning back. I leaned back in my chair. "You sure about that?" "I'm sure I don't want to waste my life waiting for someone to change." We sat in silence for a while. She sipped her tea and I gazed at the stars above. Then I said, "You know Ryan doesn't resent you." She turned, caught off guard. "He told me he's worn out, sure, but he also said he hopes you find peace." Emily stared into her mug, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. "He used to say that too, that he hoped I'd find peace." I could never tell if it came from love or if he just wanted me to shut up. I didn't know what to say. I stayed quiet, partly because I wasn't sure she was wrong. The rest of the week passed in that same subdued rhythm. She scrubbed the guest bathroom, grabbed groceries once, and insisted on covering the cost even though I said it wasn't needed. She respected boundaries, never poked into my room, never stayed up late chatting. There was no chemistry, no flirtation, just two people sharing a space and a lot of quiet. On the sixth day, I came home from work and found her folding clothes in the living room. She looked up with a smile. "I found a spot. Month-to-month lease. It's tiny, but it'll work." "That's great," I said, nodding. "I'm heading out tomorrow morning. My cousin's bringing his truck." I stood there, unsure what to say next. She continued, "I just want to thank you for everything, for not making this any tougher than it already was." "No need to thank me," I said. "But I'm glad you did." She hesitated. "I know this all sort of kicked off because of that comment you made, probably not meaning much. And maybe it hit me harder than it should have. But don't beat yourself up." I let out a soft laugh. "Bit late for that." "I'm serious," she said. "You didn't wreck us. We were already falling apart. That night, we didn't talk much. She turned in early, and I stayed up, flipping through channels I wasn't really watching. My mind was racing. Part of me felt lighter, like things were finally sliding back to normal. No more tension, no more overthinking every word. But another part felt oddly hollow, like something had stormed into my life, turned it upside down, and was now fading away with barely a sound. The next morning, I helped her load her bags into her cousin's truck. She gave me a brief hug before hopping in. Nothing over the top, just a genuine thank you from someone who needed a safe spot and found one. I stood on the curb, hands in my pockets, watching the truck cruise down the street until it vanished. Then I went inside. The house was silent again, too silent. That evening, Ryan swung by, gave a single knock, then pushed open the screen door like old times. "Can I hang out?" he asked. "Sure," I said. He sat next to me on the porch step, and for a while we just sat there saying nothing. "She's gone?" he asked eventually. "Yeah, got her own place." He nodded slowly. "So it's really done, huh?" "I think she decided that a long time ago." He let out a sigh. "It's strange. I always figured I'd be furious if she left. but now I just feel empty. We sat in silence again until he said something unexpected. I'm not upset she came to you. Honestly, I'm glad it was you. Could have been worse. You've always been real with me. I respect that. Thanks, man, I said. I'll be okay, he added. Not tomorrow, maybe, but soon enough. I've got time. We tapped our beer bottles together and sat as the light dimmed. The sun sank, and everything around us looked the same as ever, but it all felt different. It's been 2 months since Emily left my place. That morning is still crystal clear. She stood by the front door, her cousin's truck rumbling outside, her bags packed and ready. She looked steady, not rattled, not teary, just prepared. She gave me a quick, firm hug, like someone who knew this was farewell. No sobs, no let's stay in touch. Thank you, Tyler, she said. I mean it. I nodded. Hope things work out for you. She flashed one last smile, climbed into the truck, and just like that, she was gone. That night, the house felt vast, hollow. I kept passing the couch where she'd slept, glancing at the blanket she left, still neatly folded where she'd placed it. I didn't touch it for days. I'm not sure why. Maybe habit, or maybe I was still giving her space, even after she'd moved on. A week later, Ryan and I started talking again. It wasn't like before, like nothing had happened, but it was better than I'd hoped. We didn't act like it never went down. In fact, we addressed it. One evening, he stopped by with a beer and asked, "So, you think this was always how it'd end?" I shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. I think she made her choice way before I said anything. Yeah, he said, nodding. I think I did too. Just never admitted it. Their divorce wrapped up quietly. No shouting matches, no courtroom theatrics, no explosions. Ryan kept the house across the street. He brought home a scruffy dog from the shelter. Not a looker, but as friendly as they come. Named him Rocky. I catch him out in the yard sometimes, tossing a ball, chuckling in the early light. As for Emily, I haven't a clue where she landed after that initial short-term rental. She never circled back. No messages, no calls, no efforts to reconnect. And I didn't reach out either. There was nothing left unresolved. No commitments made. No tale that needed another chapter. She wandered into my life out of nowhere, lingered just long enough to leave an impression, then moved on when the moment was right. That's how it goes sometimes. People breeze in, hang around for a spell, then drift away. Me? I slipped back into my routine, back to the garage, trimming the grass on weekends, hitting the grocery store, patching up odds and ends around the house. I even started tackling that back deck I'd been dodging for over a year. Life settled back to normal, but not quite the same normal. I shifted a bit. I began watching my words more closely, realizing how even a casual remark can send ripples farther than you'd ever expect. I don't believe I broke their marriage, but I can't pretend I didn't nudge things along, whether I meant to or not. And yeah, I still mull it over sometimes. That evening I tossed out, "Maybe you ought to walk away from him." To me, it was a flippant quip, a throwaway line. To her, it was something else. A mirror held up to feelings she'd been wrestling with but hadn't yet dared to voice. When she showed up at my door the next night, I learned something new. Life doesn't always flash warning signals. Sometimes it just arrives. Would I do things differently if I could rewind? Maybe. I might have bitten my tongue, thought twice before making light of someone's hurt. But then again, maybe it was all bound to happen. Maybe I was just the final nudge in a series of subtle pushes. I don't carry guilt, not exactly, but I do hold on to the memory. A memory of one odd week when everything tipped off balance, of a couch that turned into a refuge, of two people trapped in a loveless marriage that limped on out of habit, and of me, stuck in the middle without ever signing up for it. It's the sort of thing you don't see coming, the kind you don't erase from your mind, and the kind of lesson you only need once to take something from. So yeah, that's the story of how I made a careless joke about my neighbor leaving her husband. The next day she did, and she showed up at my place. She stayed a week, then left. Their marriage ended. And me? I'm still right here. Same old Tyler.